Did Quaid-e-Azam want to make Pakistan a secular state? G. Parwez. Translated and edited by Salayina Karim and Fazal Karim. Quaid-e-Azam Trust. About the author. Ghulam Ahmad Parwez was born at Butala, Punjab, British India in 1903. He studied the Quran and the classics of Islam under the tutelage of his grandfather, a celebrated scholar and eminent Sufi Muslim mystic. Parwez gained a thorough understanding of the traditions, beliefs, and practices of conventional Islam, including the discipline of Tasawwuf, Muslim mysticism, with its arduous meditation and spiritual exercises. His study of the history of Islam, beliefs, and practices of pre-Islamic religions and wider knowledge of human thought throughout the ages inspired him to question the prevailing beliefs of Muslims. He moved away from the religious ideas that have accumulated around Islam over the centuries and turned his attention to the pristine beliefs expounded by the Quran. Parwez's immense philosophical work is the result of his deep study of Islam not as a religion but as deen, a word that has no parallel in Western languages. It can best be described as a way of life, and in the Islamic context, a social system based on Quranic values and its immutable principles. The exploration of the meaning of deen forms the core of more than 45 books and innumerable essays, articles, and lectures. His most famous books in Urdu include Mafhum al-Quran, Exposition of the Quran, in 3 volumes; Lugat al-Quran, Dictionary and Concepts of Quranic Words, in 4 volumes; Matlab al-Furqan, Exegesis, Tafsir, of the Holy Quran, in 6 volumes. The 7th volume was printed posthumously. Tabweeb al-Quran, Classification of the Holy Quran, in 3 volumes. Maraji Insaniyat, Biography of Messenger Muhammad, peace be upon him, Nizami Rabubiyat, System of Universal Sustenance. His writings have inspired widespread awakening in intelligentsia and the public alike in many parts of the world. Aside from being an author and scholar, Parwez was the founder of Quaid-e-Azam, a monthly magazine, which he launched in 1938 at the instance of Dr. Sir Muhammad Iqbal and under the guidance of Quaid-e-Azam. Great leader Muhammad Ali Jinnah, founder of Pakistan. This magazine continues to be published from Lahore regularly to this day. He also took an active part in the Pakistan movement. And as a counsel of Jinnah on matters pertaining to Islam, Parwez was one of the few people who was allowed to visit Jinnah without an appointment. He received the Tehreek-e-Pakistan movement gold medal posthumously for his services to the nation on August 14, 1989. Pakistan Independence Day. Maqbool Mahmood Farhad, Essex, UK. Foreword. This booklet is of special significance to me. It is directly responsible for the publication of my first book, and indirectly for my second as well. Indeed, this short publication can be credited for practically launching my writing career. Avid readers of Pakistani history will know that Chief Justice Muhammad Munir's From Jinnah to Zia, 1979, is said to be one of Pakistan's all-time bestsellers. This is because Munir was the first to openly declare that M.A. Jinnah, founder of Pakistan, was a secularist. i.e., he advocated the separation of religion and state as in modern democratic states. Coming as it did from a former Chief Justice, this declaration carried much weight for Pakistani readership, and indeed, as Munir testified in his book, across the world as well. G. A. Parwez, who had known Jinnah personally and had been his counsel on matters relating to Islam, wrote a rebuttal in Urdu in 1980 soon after the second edition of Munir's book was released. The English translation of that text can be found in the following pages. However, the original rebuttal missed one vital piece of information. And since this missing information was the catalyst for some completely new and important research I conducted some 25 years later, I would like to share the details for the benefit of the reader. I originally came to translate this booklet not for Quaid-e-Azam, but for my father. In 2003 he had published a book titled Quran or Pakistan. Karachi. Bazamil Mafun. Containing his own Urdu poetry alongside a collection of G.A. Parwez's writings, and the text of this booklet appeared as one of its chapters. My father and I worked together on the English translation, and in the course of cross-checking the references, I obtained a copy of From Jinnah to Zia. This was when I first noticed a quote not accounted for in Parwez's rebuttal. Parwez has written that in From Jinnah to Zia Munir relied on two pieces of evidence to support his claim that Jinnah was a secularist. They are Jinnah's statements against theocracy. Jinnah's inaugural address to the Pakistan Constituent Assembly, on August 11, 1947. However, I found that Munir had actually relied on not two, but three pieces of evidence. The third and most important piece of evidence that Munir produced, and which he cited several times for emphasis, was Jinnah's interview to Reuters, dated May 21, 1947. Dated incorrectly in Munir's book as 1946. In this interview, Jinnah supposedly said that he envisioned Pakistan as a modern democratic state with sovereignty resting in the people. Munir 1980, p.29. He stressed that the words were at odds with the Objectives Resolution, which states that sovereignty rests with Allah. At this point, since Parwez had not addressed the quote, I decided to try and find the original source to look at the context in which it might have been used. When I did obtain it around a month later, it emerged that not only was the date wrong, but the quote was actually a fake. Since that time, I have referred to it as the Munir quote. This was just the beginning of my journey in learning about the Pakistan story. At first I intended only to write an article on this quote, but I had underestimated the significance of what I had uncovered. Munir's quote, along with the two pieces of evidence that Parwez had highlighted, had long become a formulaic argument copied virtually verbatim time and again by every kind of writer, from the journalist to the historian, and accepted blindly as fact, without question. No one had thought to check on the original source, and in fact no one even seemed to know or care as to where it originated. My first book, Secular Jinnah. Munir's Big Hoax Exposed. 2005. Was the unexpected outcome of my first round of research, and here I wrote that the original source was probably Munir's From Jinnah to Zia. But I was later to discover that this was not the original source of the quote. At any rate, my book was short and it hardly touched on Pakistan's founding history. Over the next 5 years, my research continued and intensified, and I resolved to release a revised edition containing, among other things, updated information on the misconceptions about Jinnah and the Pakistan story. Instead, I ended up writing an entirely new book. This was a complete political biography on Jinnah, which also covered my updated research on the Munir quote. By the time I released Secular Jinnah and Pakistan, What the Nation Doesn't Know in 2010, I had learned that the Munir quote had its origins not in Munir's 1979 book, but in another famous publication authored by Munir. The report of the Court of Inquiry constituted under Punjab Act 2 of 1954. It is better known as the Munir Report, since it made Munir a celebrity and he became Chief Justice of the Federal Court soon after the inquiry ended. Following the Munir Report, the first time that the fake quote was used as supporting evidence for a secular Pakistan was in Pakistan's Constituent Assembly in August 1954. This quote had never been cited before, simply because it didn't exist. And so this was the first time that the secularist politicians of Pakistan succeeded in silencing their opponents outright. Thereafter Munir's quote was accepted as a legitimate piece of evidence for 50 years. As for Quran or Pakistan, although we began its translation in 2004, we were unable to publish it due to technical issues, and subsequently this also delayed the publication of this booklet for a long time. I am happy to know that the booklet at least is finally going into print. It may be one of Parwez's lesser known works, but without it, the Munir quote may not have come to light for another 50 years. For that reason, it certainly has great historical value, but to me personally, for my own reasons, its worth is immeasurable. Saleh-Ina Karim, Nottingham. August 23, 2012.